Good morning, everyone. I am the Reverend Christine Dance, and it is my honor to serve as the minister of the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Phoenix. Welcome to our Sunday online worship. We need each other, and it is so good to be together. Welcome home. The Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Phoenix strives to be a spiritual community for our time, focused on diverse theological perspectives, radical inclusion, and knowing that issues of justice and equity influence everything that we do. We have a special awareness for those who have been historically marginalized, and we welcome all of every race, class, ethnicity, immigration status, sexual orientation, gender identity, religious background, mental and physical ability, and disability. We welcome you, your whole family, your whole self, as we build a community of kindness and caring and courage and hope. This morning, I start our service with sad news and the loss of one in our community. I am sad to let you know that Jane Grenard died earlier this week. For those of you who might have seen her obituary, it said August 2nd. It was actually on September 2nd. Jane was a member of this congregation for decades, and she died at 87 years old after struggling with Alzheimer's. Her husband, Jack, at her side to the very end. Her son, Mark, is also a member of this congregation. Jane was at home and was being cared for by Jack until right at the very end, with some signs of distress, she went to the hospital and passed away 4 hours later. So we are thinking of Jack and Mark and their daughter Liz this week, and we light a candle of memory for Jane. This morning, we have the Terry Napa family lighting our chalice. I invite you to grab a chalice of your own at home and say along with Terry and Sasha and Elizabeth the words of our covenant.
Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to share our strength in fellowship, thus do we covenant.
Thank you all. It's so good to see you. Now, let me introduce our worship team. We have with us this morning our Director of Children's Ministries, Katie Resendez, our pianist, Mary Coda, and you'll be meeting a bunch of our new worship associates in the next coming weeks. But the first of our new worship associates is with us today, and that is Carrie Lifshitz. So welcome to everyone on our worship team. Behind the scenes, we have our AV whiz kid, Justin Walgren, and Brad Chapman is our moderator today. The chat is open. I hope that you all have figured out by now that you can chat to each other, you can chat to us. We have made it so that you can make comments all the way through the service. And we have a few announcements in the life of our community. All of these announcements can be found on Compass, which is our online newsletter, which you can sign up for on our website at phoenixuu.org. So next week is a big week. It is our in-gathering, but it is our online in-gathering. It is our water communion. So I am hoping that during this week, you will contribute with photos or videos of yourself. We want to see your faces. So you can do this 3 different ways. You can actually come to the front door of UUCP where we've got water vases out there, and you can pour water in there, take a picture of yourselves or a video less than 20 seconds. I came in this morning and there was a whole bunch of water there that was great. Pour a lot in because, evaporation in Arizona. Or you can take a picture or a video of yourselves interacting with water. It might be drinking water or in a pool or when you're in a lake or a river sometime, whatever creative way you can do that. Or just send us a picture of yourself so we can see your faces. Please do this by Monday. Yes, end of day tomorrow. We would love to have those so that we can have them in a video next week. And we've got lots of surprises for you. I also wanted to let you know that we have continued our work with the Navajo Nation. This week, we are helping a group of kids, youth basically, who are doing a lot of work to prepare their community for winter. So they are finding dead wood, cutting it up and delivering it to homes for heat for the winter. And we sent to them $1,800 worth of supplies, chainsaws and axes and gloves and all kinds of things so that they can do that work. We did that because of your generosity. So thank you so very much. The water communion picture sent to minister at phoenixuu.org. I just saw that. I also want to let you know that after the water communion next week, we have a very special opportunity to vote to ordain a minister. Immediately following the service next week, we will be voting to co-ordain Anthony Johnson as a minister. It is a specific right and privilege of a congregation to do that in our faith. So plan on sticking around after the service next week. And finally, right after the service this week, for anyone who is new or visiting, first of all, we welcome you. And we have a Get to Know UUCP, and that will be following the coffee hour. So that information is in Compass, and Brad is putting it up on the screen. It will be today at 12:30. So we hope that you will join us, even if you're just curious. Just feel free, or if you've been here for a long time and you just want to come and meet new people, please come join us. We are collecting our offering virtually, just like our service. We ask you to be generous in your giving to support the mission of this beloved community. You can text UUCP to 73256. You can donate through the website, or you can do an old-fashioned check. For all that you give to our congregation, we are so grateful. Now, as we get settled into our topic today, where we are going to wrestle with the concept of defund our police, we present you with a piece of music that came out of the Poor People's Campaign. They are leading the song to a group. Please imagine that they are leading you, and please sing along.
Good morning. My name is Katie Resendez, and I'm the Director of Children's Ministry here at UUC Phoenix. Okay, let's try this. Cops and robbers, Dragnet, Gunsmoke, Adam 12, James Bond, maybe a family member. If you were lucky, the Mod Squad, Inspector Gadget, Get Smart, Beverly Hills, what is it called? Beverly Hills Cop? I can't remember. But what were the first images you had of law enforcement? Where did you learn about what police officers and folks were meant to act like or look like or be? They taught us a lot, and they taught us a lot about our communities, and more than anything, taught us about the good guys and the bad guys. Which isn't great, because we know that life is a lot more subtle than that. And there are folks who do bad and folks who do good, and there's everything in between. And those are just stories anyway, and we know better than that. Oh, wait, no. What we know is that stories shape what we think about ourselves and who we think other people can be and how we think our institutions should function. And there is a story about law enforcement that has messed us all up, even those of us who haven't seen it. In your head, I want you to think of an image, and it's not a comfortable one. So duck out if you need to, but it's nighttime and a car gets pulled over and you see a law enforcement officer, a police officer, walking to the driver's side, and he asks everyone to step out, and it's brightly lit and there's a spotlight, and the person comes out of the car and gets really anxious, and suddenly they run. You hear kung, 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 kung as the police officer's boots pound the ground, and they chase that individual down and they catch them. And they pin them to the ground and they search them. And inevitably, they find some terrible, terrible contraband. The camera cuts to the police officer talking, maybe still a little out of breath, but we know that that perpetrator, that bad guy, has been contained. And the police officer is telling us how important and how good it was that the perpetrator was caught when they were. Otherwise, they would have hurt the community more, or their life would have kept going down the wrong path, and it was just at this moment that they could turn it around. And everyone feels peaceful. And while the perpetrator may be yelling or swearing or shirtless or something that makes them seem ridiculous to us, we know that that law enforcement officer did their job and kept their community safe. As we cut to commercial, we hear that familiar song, bad boys, what you gonna do? And I don't know how we feel after that, because that's not how we want law enforcement to act, and it's not how we want law enforcement interactions to go, but it's the picture we see, and we see it again and again and again. And the problem is that it's not just us watching it, and it's not just us watching it thinking that it's some city far away. It's us believing it and us perpetuating that narrative and thinking that the show Cops is how cops should behave. And in fact, we see that the producers of the shows have met with not just law enforcement units, but mayors and city councils to decide if it's the right fit for their city and how their police can better serve this show. And yes, the show is ending, but there are so many more like it and so many that have come behind it. And moreover, the damage is done. We've watched it. We believe it. We think that police chases are necessary, be they in car or on foot. Do you know that that's not true around the world? Not everyone thinks that's a good idea. There are countries where it just doesn't happen. You don't run down the perpetrator. And this year we've learned, after many years of watching and seeing, that when we chase someone down and pin them down, it is not a good thing. So what do we do? This narrative is poisoning us, and it's also teaching people who are aspiring to be law enforcement what we want their job to be. And it's filling our prisons, and it's breaking our hearts. So we have to liberate ourselves. Yes, even from the Andy Griffith Show, even from Adam 12 and James Bond, and especially from Cops. We have to liberate our brains so that we can think about a new way of what community policing can look like, what we want it to be, how we want to keep our community safe, what we actually need. And so that we can think about how and who we want to uphold and enforce the laws that we work so hard to get passed and ratified. Because every step in community care, from setting the policies to enforcing the laws, is a sacred, sacred work. And we need to make sure that those jobs look the way we need them to be, and that we help the people in those positions be the people we want them to be. We have that power, we have that creativity, and we have that strength, and we have that need. This needs to be healthy. This needs to be community driven, and it needs to honor all of us. I hope everyone has a wonderful week. You are so very loved and so, so powerful.
Thank you, Mary. It is the time when we share the joys and sorrows that exist in our hearts and in our community. And being together, it is good to share, to support each other, and to celebrate for the things that are going well, and to hold that space when things are challenging. Please write any joys and sorrows that you want our community to know in the chat. Please, you can put it to everyone or to all panelists. Please put your name at the front so I know who it is. And if you have something that is private that you want just me to know, please put the word private up front and I will hold that in my heart. And as you are doing that, I will share a few of the joys and sorrows in our community. First of all, I want to let you know that Peggy Payton went back home on Thursday. She had been in the hospital for 3 weeks and then in rehab for a couple of weeks. We are working to set her up with meals and deliveries and working with her family to see how we can support her. If you are interested in helping provide any meals, please reach out to our Unicare team at unicare@phoenixuu.org. I also wanted to let you know that Kim St. Clair is mourning the passing of her father this week. Her father, Pat, died peacefully on Friday morning with family had been gathered around him at Hospice of the Valley. So we wish her and her family peace. So let us turn to the joys and sorrows in our community. Ben says, I'm so happy to be here again today. I had such a great week since my first visit last Sunday. So Ben, we're so glad that you're here. And we hope that maybe you can join us for the Get to Know UUCP at 12:30. So the Lifshitz family says, Joy, we know the worship associate today, and we love that she's on the team. So do we. Thank you for sharing her with us, Lifshitz family. From Linda Vance, thank you, Linda. I was going to see if you wanted to say this. Larry Reed is recovering from surgery to improve his heart function. We appreciate the kind and thoughtful words to help him improve. So yay, Larry, you keep healing. We're pulling for you and getting that heart pumping well for you. And let me see if there's any more that come up. Elisa Phoenix says, my parents are moving to Mesa via my home. They've sold their Utah home and will be living with me until they buy a home in Mesa. Yay, that's awesome. And let's see. Francis, I did not see that earlier. Thank you for saying that. Joy, Francis Wiggett II and Lynn McVean are getting remarried next Sunday, September 13th. All members of the congregation are welcome to attend the Zoom version. So that is wonderful. And Francis just put that meeting information for the panelists. And what I'm going to do is ask Brad to please put that out for everyone to see. And we need a wedding at this time. That's just wonderful. And Joan Gale says, cousin Rick had a bicycle accident and had major surgery. Please send healing wishes. The Douglas family says, are very much enjoying our first live streamed service. Thank you. And Sarita, so welcome. And we're so glad to have you here. Jess Putnam says, today we made brownies. That's awesome. And Stephanie says, Stephanie, who moved to Minnesota, but who still attends virtually, a joy. My company established a diversity and inclusion committee to start diversity and inclusion initiatives. I was chosen to be a committee member. I'm honored and excited and want to consciously contribute in a way that honors everyone involved while navigating my own biases. I know it will be a valuable experience. Wonderful. And I will see if I can put the link for the wedding in. Actually, I probably can't because copy and pasting isn't happening. So Francis, I'm going to ask that you put the date and the time and the Zoom room to all attendees so that everyone can see that. So thank you all for sharing. And for those joys and sorrows we hold in our hearts and that are still on our minds, we hold space for them and we hold you in our hearts. And now we have our time for prayer and meditation. So I want you to try to let your stress go a little bit. Unclench your jaws, put your shoulders down, Maybe feel the tension go out of your hands. Go ahead, I can picture you doing this at home. Shake it out. Feel it slip down your back, down your legs, and breathe. Our prayer today is from Nadia Boltz-Weber. Nadia is a radical, slightly irreverent, always relevant Lutheran minister and a fellow graduate from Iliff School of Theology in Denver, where I went to seminary. God of many names, we don't know how to feel less tired. We don't know how to vanquish our own fears. We don't know how to stop being angry at stupid people on Twitter. Personal note, that might be just me. We don't know how to live through a global pandemic and anti-Black violence and wildfires and hurricanes and the fact that Chadwick Boseman just died. Personal note, please keep anyone who might say some kind of God needed another angel in heaven nonsense far from me for their own safety, Lord. We don't know how to sustain the effort it takes to not completely freak out. And the effort it takes from freaking out is one of the things that is making us so tired. We need some reminders right now. Remind us that for every tragedy that's newsworthy, there are a million kindnesses and countless acts of love that go unreported. Personal note, remind me that I can take Facebook off my phone. Like, that's always an option. But more than anything, remind us of our own souls and hearts. Remind us that there is an essential, holy, unhurtable part of ourselves that never tires, that does not know fear, that is unaffected by other people, that cannot be irritated, that has nothing to achieve. If taking a few breaths reminds us of our truest center, then nudge us to breathe. But personal note, please, Lord, not in the voice of a 24-year-old white girl yoga teacher. You know I can't handle that. If laughing our butts off reminds us of what is most true, then nudge our friends to send funny texts. If eating a darn vegetable now and then reminds us that our bodies need us, then give us the will to make a salad. Amen. Blessed be, and Ashe. Breathe. As we turn to our topic today about defunding the police, we need to remember why we need to talk about this at all. What a summer it's been. George Floyd's murder is still fresh in our minds. And less than 2 weeks ago, Jacob Blake was shot 7 times in the back as he got into his car with his 3 young children in the back seat. We can discuss if these people committed crimes. We can discuss how policing is a difficult job. But I hope that we are past discussing whether people need to die or be paralyzed before any justice is served, and whether it is worth it for them to die over something like a $20 bill.
Before the pandemic hit, my family and we had been thinking about buying a trailer to go camping, not really camping, but camping nonetheless. When we realized this pandemic was going to last a while, we did it. we bought a trailer and we love it. We're having so much fun camping. And in fact, this past Sunday evening, we came home from a camping trip and parked the trailer in front of our house. Then in the morning, Monday morning, we spent cleaning out and emptying the trailer. Then in the afternoon, we got a visit from a police officer at our front door saying that a neighbor had complained that there was a trailer on the street. This was less than 24 hours after we got home. The officer understood that we were unloading, and we told him that we were taking it to storage the next day. So he ended up not giving us a citation. End of story. But really, is it the end of story? Because it really frustrated me. On so many levels, that interaction was the result of white privilege. When we opened our front door to a police officer in full uniform, including bulletproof vest, armed with his gun, we did not experience the trauma resulting from decades of mistreatment due to racial profiling. We did not have to show proof that we owned the trailer. And we did not have to prove we were going to move the trailer. And perhaps most telling, we live in a white neighborhood where a neighbor thought that it was better to call the police rather than just knock on my door and have a conversation. How is this okay? Why should a police officer have to come to our door to make sure we would be moving our trailer? Is that really what protect and serve is? I mean, surely the police officer, I guess, was essentially there to protect the beauty of the neighborhood and serve neighborhood politics. But was that really the best use of his time? This whole interaction annoyed and frustrated me. And let me reiterate, I am white. I cannot even begin to imagine the effect this would have had on me if I were a person of color.
I want to tell you a story. 6 years ago, in August of 2014, police officer Darren Wilson shot and killed Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. In 2014, I wasn't a minister yet. I was just one of those standard Unitarian Universalists, and I was also a marketing and innovation consultant. Karen and I were at friend's house for the weekend, and the TV was on for most of it. We were watching the coverage of what was happening in Ferguson, the protests, the fires, the looting, and I got more exposure to the term Black Lives Matter. I had first heard about it because the term came up when Trayvon Martin was shot just 14 miles north of where we lived in Orlando, Florida. I want to be honest about what I thought when I saw on the TV, because you all might be able to relate to it. I couldn't figure out why people were destroying things in their own city and lighting them on fire. I was looking for the logic in that. We'll get to that. And as a marketing consultant who worked with companies on their messaging, I really wanted to help them with that Black Lives Matter message. Like, is that the best way to get the message across? Is that going to help people whose minds need to change to understand? Wasn't it maybe a little bit too provocative? I mean, is that really what you're going to go with? And I even went down like, oh, I could market test it. I could do focus groups on it. You know, I could do some consumer work on it because that's where my brain was. It made me uncomfortable. And after all, weren't they trying to convince people like me? So does that sound familiar to any of you? As Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you do better. So here we are 6 years later, and after George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis this summer, and I heard the term defund the police, and I felt some of those similar sentiments come back. I paused, and I know better. And I'm trying to do better. I'm understanding that it is not my place as a privileged white person to try to reason with logic of the actions of people who are so angry, so discouraged, so fearful, so fed up, and to tell them how to react. It is not a logical situation. And the minute that I start having thoughts of property being more important than human life, I have to stop myself. I've learned and understood that activist slogans are not corporate advertising campaigns. They are visionary. They are bold. They are provocative. They are often born out of fast responses to tragedy, like the death of Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown. It is also not my job to judge the appropriateness or acceptability of activist slogans. In fact, it is actually an act of white supremacy. Who am I to tell them to tone it down so that it is more acceptable to people like me? Am I really the center of the universe? The answer is no, I'm not. Who am I to say that it's too bold and that it may turn people off? And really, isn't it kind of audacious to think that I get a say in it anyway? That I am the target for the message? Isn't it a sign that I expect the whole world to revolve around me? Isn't that just so white privilege of me? And isn't my own discomfort with it a sign of my own white fragility? So I knew better, so I did better. I noted my discomfort with it and I went, like I don't even know what it means. So I went, I did my research. What did those who supported defund the police mean by it? What did it mean to them? What were journalists saying, and what were the activists saying, and what is the history behind it, and what is the vision of it? And if I'm uncomfortable, then I'm also turning my vision towards me, not them. So how do we handle that? 6 years ago, I was uncomfortable with Black Lives Matter. And now I wear a Black Lives Matter bracelet every single day. I've got a Black Lives Matter t-shirt, and I even got a Black Lives Matter mask. So who changed exactly? Them or me? I know some of you are in this similar place with Defund the Police because some of you have shared it with me. And I'm assuming there's a whole bunch of others of you who are wondering as well. And I am not going to tell you whether you should agree with it or not. That is not, first of all, you wouldn't believe me or do it even if I did tell you. But I really want us to wrestle with it together. We're going to unpack it a little bit. We're going to talk about why it's relevant to our UU values. For some of you, this discussion may go further than where you're comfortable. And for others, it may not go far enough. And I'm okay with that. This is important enough for us to wrestle with. And it's really important for us at UUCP to wrestle with it because we are a congregation that has embraced and struggled with police officers. A big part of our history is Nick Erfley and his family, who were members of this congregation. And Nick was killed in the line of duty in 2007 and died at the age of 33. Right here in this sanctuary where I'm standing, we held his wake and supported his family and understood at a personal level the danger and risks of this job. I know in our congregation we have retired and active duty law enforcement officers in our congregation right now. And we are a people who value civic service and helping people in our community. This congregation is also one that has struggled with the police. We've struggled with having them on our campus. We've wrestled in our safety conversations of when we should call them, when we should not. And as a country, we have been mourning oh so many who have died. This summer, it was George Floyd, it was Jacob Blake from Kenosha, Wisconsin. And this week, we learned of the death of Daniel Prude, who was killed in Rochester, someone who had mental health and substance abuse issues and died unnecessarily. And we know the officers who barged into Breonna Taylor's home and killed her have still not been charged in Louisville. Honestly, I get kind of tired of the conversations about good cops and bad cops because it is just not that simple. Yes, there are people in every profession who aren't trained or have discipline issues, some that are really great and some who aren't, but we are all human beings. And looking at people on a binary and putting them into the good or bad category just leaves all of it lacking. And we cannot blame this whole problem on a few bad seeds. It's just not how it works. Instead, we need to look at the entire system, the whole process. It's who is recruited, how are they trained, what is valued and not valued, the culture, and how that spills over into our streets. Now, I know you. We are complex beings, and we can hold multiple truths. We can hold that valuable human beings hold these jobs and that the job can be dangerous. And we learned after Vietnam as a country that we can decry war, but still support soldiers returning from war. We learned a hard lesson after Vietnam when we said the war is unjust and we don't believe it, and we treated veterans as dispensable. We learned that we could hold the sacrifices and the job of soldiers in one hand and fight against war in the other. Why can't we do that with police officers? And we need to hold that and. We need to hold that the history of policing is problematic at best. The first police force, official one, in the US was in Boston in 1838, and it was put in place to protect shipping and commercial property, for property. But in the South, it was a totally different economic system based on preserving the slavery system. There were policing forces in the South for 150 years before Boston, tasked with chasing down runaways and preventing slave revolts. And after the Civil War, the local sheriffs, remember the sheriffs, Andy Griffith, they functioned similar to the slave patrols, especially down in the South, enforcing segregation and keeping freed slaves from voting rights. Those sheriffs turned into police departments and an entire system. We know that anti-Black oppression is in the DNA of this system. We can't just make a few tweaks and then say, oh, we fixed it. And that's actually where Defund the Police came from. And I think some of the challenge that some people have is that they think it means totally unfund or disband the police. And I'll be honest, there are some people who wish that to be true. But I believe that there are also a number that are saying, how can we take the funds that are going towards the police and reappropriate them so that the right people with the right skills do the right job? Police training covers a lot, but there's a big focus on weaponry and a militarization mindset that goes at odds with helping people. The serve and protect, the serve part has been missing, and it's missing even more now that we've got police going up against protesters, turning peaceful situations into very dangerous ones where people are getting killed. So let's talk a little bit about Daniel Prude in Rochester. The day of his death, Daniel was talking about suicide, acting suicidal. He also had PCP in his system. His family was very worried about his erratic behavior, and so they called the police, and the police took him to the hospital. He was there for only a few hours and was discharged, and he was put in a taxi and sent back home. He was still suicidal, and he was still erratic, and his family did not know what to do. He had already thrown himself down the stairs, and they called the police again when he had left the house, and they thought that he was going to jump off of a bridge. So they called the police. The police ended up putting a spit sock over his head, and Daniel suffocated from that. In restraining him, they killed him. Now, I'm not saying that Daniel Prude wasn't a challenge. It sounds like he was very distressed and he was aggressive, but he was suicidal and on drugs. Did he have to die from that? What defund the police means is that we can take funds from what we're spending on police and put them in less militarized, less violent ways to help people. So imagine this. Imagine if Daniel's brother called 911 and said he's suicidal and he's on PCP, he's acting very erratic. And the 911 agent sent out a suicide prevention social worker and somebody who had expertise in working with people with drugs. What if they had the tools to de-escalate the situation, not using a mask that would suffocate him, and to deal with the situation that they had, to work with his mental health situation? What if Daniel had never come back from the hospital after a few hours, but actually got the treatment that he needed when he was in the hospital? It is not hard to imagine several different paths where Daniel could have received the help he needed rather than being dead. What Defund the Police is asking us to do is to think imaginatively about how we could care for each other. And it is also saying that it is too late to have small incremental changes. So what does it look like? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was asked this, and this is what she said. The good news is that it actually doesn't take a lot of imagination. It looks like a suburb. Affluent white communities already live in a world where they choose to fund youth, health, housing, etc., more than they fund police. These communities have lower crime rates, not because they have more police, but because they have more resources to support healthy society in a way that reduces crime. When a teenager or preteen does something harmful in a suburb, I say teen because this is often where the lifelong carceral cycles begin for Black and brown communities. Then white communities bend over backwards to find alternatives to incarceration for their loved ones to protect their future, like community service or rehab or restorative measures. Why don't we treat Black and brown people the same way? Why doesn't the criminal system care about Black teens' futures the way they care about white teens' futures? Why doesn't the news use Black people's graduation or family photos in stories the way they do when they cover white people, like Brock Turner, who commit harmful crimes? Affluent suburbs, white suburbs, also design their own lives so they walk through the world without having much interruption or interaction with police at all, aside from community events and speeding tickets. And many of these communities try to reduce those too. Just starting there would be a dramatically and radically different world than what we are experiencing now. End quote. I think the place that we're in the summer of 2020 is that we are done with this. We are done with the deaths. We don't want one single more. No more people dying. So we have to ask what we are willing to sacrifice to make this happen. And we should all reconcile with who we mean when we say we need to be willing to be uncomfortable with not knowing exactly what this looks like. We're waiting for the master plan from the Defund the Police folks, and that's not what they're giving us. They're giving us a vision, a call for action. Are we willing to not have our privilege protected? How upset are we really by all these deaths? Is it enough to risk change? So here's the thing, change doesn't happen by visionaries saying, well, first we're going to take this tiny step, and then maybe we'll take this tiny step, and the budget, and here's all of the elements that will happen, and here's how hard it will be. And then those losing power are going, oh, that's a great plan. We're totally on board. It has never worked that way. Change happens by someone standing up and saying, I have a dream. And enough people who believe in that dream as well are also willing to stand up for it. And then those who have heard the mandate to figure out how to do it, well, we're at that vision stage. We're actually way past that stage. We're at the stand up and say this is not okay stage. We're at the not one more, and we'll remember each one stage. Does it mean taking funds from the existing system and giving it to community resources that aren't as rooted in anti-Black oppression and weaponization and militarization? I don't know, but I'm not closing off any routes. And I am listening very carefully to the visionaries who are sharing with me their ideas for a path forward. This is really unique space for Unitarian Universalists, and this is why it's relevant. We are the visionaries. We are the ones who believe in collective liberation. We are the ones who don't believe in a manual or a Bible to tell us what to believe. We are willing to live with questions and wrestle with them and believe in a better future for everyone. And isn't that what this calls for? We know that we are appalled by these killings. We lament the death of every single one. And we know the system needs to change. But our anger is not enough. We need to push forward with the vision or support the people who have one. I encourage you to wrestle with this, to dig further and support those who are fighting for the change. So might it be. For our closing words, I'd like to invite you to coffee hour after the service. We will get an opportunity to talk more about this in big groups and then in smaller groups. The rooms will be in the chat and on the final slide. And also a reminder that there's also children's coffee hour, and at 12:30 there's Get to Know UUCP. And also a reminder to keep checking in on each other. We're going through hard times. Please check in. If you're interested in learning more about Defund the Police or what some of our other local partners are doing to envision change, UU Jazz gave us some resources. And we've got Mahente and Sunrise and Song and Critical Resistance. They're hosting their sold out Defund the Police workshop from the summer again over a weekend now. There's a link for that we're going to put in the chat. Also locally, Mass Liberation has a 3-part Let's Talk About Abolition series. That's here in Phoenix. And you can find parts 1 and 2 on Mass Liberation Arizona, their Facebook page. Part 3 is on September 16th, and we're posting the link for that. And of course, our own UU Love Resists and Side with Love are halfway through their Taking a Collective Breath series. People can still sign up and watch what's the previous courses in the service. So take a deep breath with me. May we listen to those who have a vision. May we recognize our privilege when we do listen. May we be able to recognize our human complexity and our ability to hold multiple truths. May we fight against the system, but always support the worth and dignity of the individuals. And may we be willing to be uncomfortable in order to support those who are more marginalized than us. And may we always know we can do better. Amen. Blessed be and Ashe. Go in peace and go in love. I leave you with a protest song, The Visionaries in Kenosha, Wisconsin, recorded just last week.